Probably this morning more than me. Mike Pence.
Yeah.
Mike Pence?
Mike Pence. Yeah, she is. My mom is as conservative as it gets.
No wonder she doesn't like me.
Yeah, no.
No, she doesn't like you.
Not at all. But she does like Mike Pence, and he's with us now from Washington, D.C. He is, of course, Congressman from Indiana. Mike, are we facing a government shutdown?
Is it going to happen?
Well, you know, I really think that's up to Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer and the liberals in the Senate. I mean, it's been more than 40 days since Republicans passed a resolution to fund the government with responsible budget cuts through the end of this year. We passed it again last week, and, 40 days, 40 nights, and some change. Liberals in the Senate are just continuing to posture, continuing to pose. And so, if there's a government shutdown this week, it'll be on their hands.
It'll be on the Democrats, not Republicans in any way, shape, or form, just on the Democrats. All their fault.
Well, no, look, I mean, we went through, I think, more than 90 hours of debate. Hundreds of amendments, many of which passed on a bipartisan basis. We kept our word to the American people and found $61 billion in savings this year. That's what we told the American people that we would do. We sent that to the Senate not once but twice, and so far all we've seen from Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer are words like extremism, reckless, irresponsible, and I think the American people see through this. They see that $61 billion is scarcely a down payment on fiscal discipline and reform. We've got big challenges ahead in the budget, the debt ceiling battle, the appropriations process. Let's just get this done. Let's keep our word to the American people, and let's have it out.
You know, Mika, there's an old saying that generals are always fighting the last war, and we've been talking about it around this table today. You really don't know who's going to take the blame if there is a government shutdown. Of course, last time the narrative is it was the Republicans. Look at these numbers, though, we just put up. Again, it shows the American people are going to be split on who's to blame if there's a government shutdown between Republicans and Democrats. You have no idea how that's going to break, and that is just something, again, it's not going to hurt conservative Republicans to shut down the government. The question is, does it hurt the president? And that's what the White House has to calculate.
Well, also, I mean, Congress isn't that popular these days. I don't think a shutdown is going to help either side, John Hellman.
Well, and historically, we use the 95 example all the time. Around the country in state governments, this happens all the time, right? Governments get shut down. And there's actually political science literature on this that shows that when you have divided government, what the people almost always do is they blame the legislature, both parties, Democrats and Republicans in the legislature, and they let the executive kind of off the hook, again, if there's divided government. So, the big advantage, the big problem that the White House has is that they don't have someone like Newt Gingrich to demonize. And that so far, John Boehner, I said earlier in the show, I think he's been he's in a precarious, weak position, but he's not unreasonable, and he doesn't look like a flaming lunatic.
I just don't think you can demonize Paul Ryan either.
Kind of hard to do.
Right. Congressman Pence, I want to ask you, you're right that Republicans, when you ran in 2010, you made these big promises to the country. Nonetheless, your leadership initially came forward with a package of cuts that was $32 billion. Conservatives in the House pushed leadership to expand that to $61 billion. You now have Democrats basically at the table where your leadership was only 2 months ago. Now, some people would say that's a pretty big victory for Republicans, and in a divided government situation, Republicans should be happy with that you're getting the amount of cuts that your leadership initially put forward. Why is that not a reasonable compromise position to keep the government open?
Well, I think, there's a lot of talk, understandably, around the table at Morning Joe about whether Republicans win or Democrats win and how it plays politically. I think the American people need to win one. I've been out here in Washington for 10 years, and I've seen this parlor game in Washington, D.C. again. It's always, don't cut him, don't cut me, cut the program behind the tree. I think this is not 1995. The American people know we have to take a decisive step to change the fiscal direction of our national government. Republicans said we would find $100 billion in savings off the president's budget in this year. That will take $61 billion in cuts. I think the American people need to win that fight, and House Republicans, I think, need to dig in and demand that $61 billion number, and I think we need to dig in now.
Congressman Pence, it's Willie Geist. A lot of Democrats have called your amendment to this budget, the amendment to defund Planned Parenthood, a deal breaker. They say no budget will be passed through the Senate with that in it. On the other side, Republicans, some conservative Republicans say they will not vote for any budget that does not have it in it. Are you willing to hold up this entire budget over defunding Planned Parenthood?
Well, of course I am. I think the American people have begun to learn that the largest abortion provider in the country is also the largest recipient of federal funding under Title X. They want to see that come to an end. You know, I think there's a broad consensus in this country, regardless of where you stand on the subject of abortion. There's a broad consensus for decades now opposing public funding of abortion and abortion providers. And so, you know, I heard Chris Smith yesterday, a longtime champion of the right to life in the House, say every single major advance that has been achieved since Roe v. Wade in the Congress was always a deal breaker. It was always a non-starter. We're going to dig in and we're going to fight for the principle that taxpayers should not have to subsidize the largest abortion provider in the country, namely Planned Parenthood of America.
So, but this is like a deal killer for you, right?
Well, you know, for me, there's no more important issue than the sanctity of life and respecting the tens of millions of Americans who cherish the sanctity of life, respecting their right not to see their tax dollars used to provide or promote abortion at home and abroad.
I mean, you would, if the choice is between passing a bill that will keep government open, that continues to fund this, or shutting it down, is this like the one issue that you would vote to shut the government down on if any funding goes towards Planned Parenthood?
Well, it's not the one issue. You know, I'll tell you straight up. I think we've got to keep our word to the American people. The American people sent a deafening message to Capitol Hill. It was most clearly expressed in the House of Representatives with a historic and decisive changeover of leadership. H.R. 1, with $61 billion in cuts, defunding Planned Parenthood, defunding Obamacare, represents the will of the American people, and you bet we're going to fight for that.